The morning rain had just stopped when Marcus Rodriguez stepped onto his front porch with his coffee, expecting nothing more than another quiet Tuesday in Millbrook Falls. Instead, he found a young woman lying unconscious against his door, swollen belly unmistakably showing she was deep into pregnancy. Her clothes were soaked, her face pale as moonlight, and she was barely breathing. At that moment, Marcus had no idea that his simple act of kindness would transform not just this stranger's life, but the entire heart of their small Pennsylvania town. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Rodriguez had always been what the neighbors called a keeper to himself kind of man. At 53, he lived alone in the modest two-story house on Maple Street that had belonged to his late parents. The house sat at the edge of Millbrook Falls Historic District, where the manicured lawns gave way to wilder patches of Pennsylvania woodland. Marcus worked third shift at the regional distribution center, loading trucks and managing inventory, which meant most folks in town only caught glimpses of him, heading to work in the evening or returning home with the dawn. He wasn't unfriendly. Exactly, but after his wife Sarah had passed from cancer 8 years prior, Marcus had gradually withdrawn from the community activities and neighborhood gatherings that once filled their calendar. Their grown daughter lived in California with her own family, visiting maybe twice a year. The house felt too big, too quiet, but Marcus had grown comfortable with the solitude. He had his routines, his small pleasures, and asked little of the world beyond being left in peace. The October morning started like any other. Marcus had finished his shift at 6, stopped at Brennan's Diner for his usual black coffee and wheat toast, then driven the familiar route home through streets lined with sugar maples dropping their brilliant orange leaves. Millbrook Falls was one of those postcard-perfect small towns that tourists love to photograph, with its covered bridge, white-steepled church, and Main Street lined with antique shops and family-owned businesses. Population 4,200, where everyone knew everyone else's business, and newcomers were noticed immediately. Marcus parked in his narrow driveway, noting that Mrs. Chun next door was already out tending her late-season chrysanthemums. She waved, and he raised his hand in acknowledgement before climbing the 3 wooden steps to his front porch. The morning air carried the crisp promise of winter, and Marcus was looking forward to settling into his recliner with the newspaper before getting some sleep, but as he fumbled for his keys, something made him pause. There was a shape against his front door that didn't belong. At first, in the dim morning light, he thought maybe a package had been delivered and fallen over. But as his eyes adjusted, Marcus realized with a jolt that it was a person. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, was slumped against his door. Her dark hair was matted with rain and leaves. Her clothes, a thin jacket over what looked like second-hand maternity clothes, were completely soaked through. Her face was frighteningly pale, almost gray, with dark circles under her closed eyes. But what struck Marcus most was how obviously pregnant she was. Even sitting, her belly was pronounced, suggesting she was quite far along. Miss, are you all right?" Marcus knelt beside her, his heart hammering. She didn't respond. When he gently touched her shoulder, her head lolled to one side. Her skin felt cold and clammy, and her breathing was so shallow he had to lean close to make sure she was breathing at all. Marcus glanced around the quiet street, wondering if anyone else had seen this. Mrs. Chun had gone back inside. The morning joggers hadn't started their routes yet. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, but as he waited for the dispatcher to answer, he realized the girl was starting to shiver violently. Whatever had happened to her, she'd been out in the weather too long. 911, what's your emergency? I have an unconscious pregnant woman on my front porch. She's breathing but unresponsive, and she's soaked through. I think she's been out in the rain for hours. After providing his address and answering the dispatcher's questions, Marcus faced a dilemma. The ambulance would take at least 10 minutes to arrive, and this girl was clearly suffering from exposure. Her lips had a bluish tint that made his chest tighten with worry. Without overthinking it, Marcus scooped the girl up in his arms. She was lighter than he'd expected, which worried him even more. Her head fell against his shoulder as he carried her inside, and he could smell the rain in her hair mixed with something else, fear, maybe, or exhaustion so deep it had become part of her. He laid her gently on the living room couch, then rushed to get towels and blankets from the linen closet. As he carefully dried her hair and wrapped her in warm blankets, Marcus noticed details that painted a troubling picture. Her clothes, while clean, were clearly well worn and too big for her frame. Her shoes had holes worn through the soles. She wore no jewelry, no wedding ring, nothing that might identify her. Her hands were rough, like someone who'd been doing hard physical work, but they were also the hands of someone very young. The girl stirred as warmth began to return to her body. Her eyelids fluttered, and Marcus found himself looking into the darkest brown eyes he'd ever seen, eyes that held a wariness that seemed far too old for her face. "Don't be afraid," Marcus said softly. "You're safe. I found you on my porch and brought you inside. There's an ambulance coming." The girl's eyes darted around the room, taking in the modest furnishings, the family photos on the mantel, Marcus's kind but weathered face. She tried to sit up, wincing, and immediately her hands went to her belly. "The baby," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "When is your baby due?" Marcus asked gently. "Soon," she said, then seemed to realize she'd revealed something she hadn't meant to. Her expression closed off, becoming guarded again. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She hesitated for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Finally she said, Emma Walsh. "I'm Marcus Rodriguez. This is my house, and you're safe here. Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up on my porch?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back determinedly. "I was walking, and I guess I got turned around in the dark. When the rain started, I saw your porch and thought maybe I could wait it out. I must have fallen asleep." It was clearly not the whole truth, but Marcus didn't push. The sound of sirens approaching filled the momentary silence. "I should go," Emma said, struggling to sit up again. "I don't want to be any trouble." "You're not going anywhere until the paramedics check you over," Marcus said firmly, but kindly. "You were unconscious, Emma. That's not something to brush off, especially not when you're pregnant." The paramedics, two young men Marcus recognized from around town, were thorough and professional. Emma's vital signs were stable but showed signs of dehydration and exhaustion. Her blood pressure was slightly elevated, which concerned them given her pregnancy. They recommended she go to the hospital for a more complete evaluation. "I can't afford a hospital," Emma said quietly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "The emergency room has to treat you regardless," one of the paramedics explained. "And there are programs that can help with costs." But Emma was already shaking her head. "I'm fine now, really. I just need to get going." Marcus watched this exchange with growing concern. This wasn't just a girl who'd gotten lost in the rain. This was someone who was scared, alone, and clearly had nowhere to go. When the paramedics asked for her address and insurance information, her answers were vague and evasive after they left, with Emma having refused transport to the hospital. An uncomfortable silence settled over the living room. Emma sat on the edge of the couch, clearly preparing to leave, but Marcus could see she was still shaky. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Emma's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, and she pressed her lips together, embarrassed. "I've got eggs, toast, some fruit. Nothing fancy, but it's food." Marcus stood up. "You shouldn't be walking around on an empty stomach, especially not in your condition." "I really should go," Emma said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Where exactly are you going?" The question hung in the air. Emma's shoulders sagged slightly, and Marcus saw the fight go out of her. I don't know, she admitted in a whisper. Marcus had lived through enough of life's hard knocks to recognize someone at the end of their rope. He'd seen that same look in his own mirror during the darkest days after Sarah's death, when getting through each day felt like an insurmountable task. Well then, he said, heading toward the kitchen, let's start with breakfast. As Marcus cooked, Emma remained perched on the edge of the couch, ready to bolt at any moment. But the smell of bacon and the warmth of the house seemed to gradually relax her guard. When he brought her a plate heaped with scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and fresh orange slices, she stared at it as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Go ahead, Marcus encouraged. Settling into his recliner with his own plate, Emma ate with the careful control of someone who'd learned not to take food for granted. But Marcus could see her hunger in the way she cleared every crumb. When she finished, she sat back with the first expression of contentment he'd seen cross her face. Thank you, she said. That was really kind. You're welcome. Marcus studied her face, noting how young she looked now that some color had returned to her cheeks. Emma, I don't want to pry, but are you in some kind of trouble? Her walls went back up immediately. No, nothing like that. I just ... I'm between places right now. Between places was a polite way of saying homeless, Marcus realized. Do you have family around here? Someone I could call? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No family. The way she said it made it clear this wasn't a topic for discussion. What about the baby's father? Emma's hand instinctively went to her belly, and her expression hardened. He's not in the picture. Marcus nodded, understanding that some stories were too painful to tell to a stranger, no matter how kind that stranger might be. He'd had his own share of subjects he didn't discuss with casual acquaintances. Look, he said, I don't know what your situation is, and I'm not going to pressure you to tell me. But you can't be wandering around with nowhere to go, especially not this close to having your baby. There are people in town who can help if you'll let them. I don't take charity, Emma said quietly but firmly. It's not charity if you earn it, Marcus replied. Millbrook Falls isn't a big place, but there are always folks looking for help. Seasonal work at the apple orchards, cleaning jobs, restaurant work. Nothing that would be too much for someone in your condition. Emma looked skeptical. And where would I stay while I'm working these jobs? Marcus hadn't thought that far ahead. But as he looked at this young woman, really just a girl, despite her circumstances, he felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose, maybe. Or just basic human decency asserting itself. You could stay here, he heard himself say. Temporarily, just until you get on your feet. Emma's eyes widened. I can't do that. You don't even know me. I know you're pregnant and have nowhere else to go, Marcus said simply. I know you seem like a decent person who's fallen on hard times. And I know this house has more rooms than one person needs. But why would you help me? It was a fair question, and Marcus took a moment to consider his answer. Why was he offering his home to a complete stranger? Maybe it was because the house had felt like a mausoleum for too long. Maybe it was because he remembered his own daughter. At that age, and the thought of her alone and scared somewhere made his heart ache. Or maybe it was just that simple human instinct to help someone who needed it. Because I can, he said finally. And because it's the right thing to do. Emma was quiet for a long time, her hands resting on her belly. Marcus could almost see her weighing her options, and probably realizing she didn't have many. I wouldn't be able to pay rent, she said eventually. Didn't ask for rent, but you could help around the house maybe. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. I'm not much of a housekeeper since my wife passed. Your wife? Sarah. Cancer took her 8 years ago. Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, but Emma caught the lingering sadness in it. I'm sorry. Thank you. She would have liked you, I think. Sarah never could resist a stray. Despite everything. Emma almost smiled at that. Are you calling me a stray? If the shoe fits, Marcus said with gentle humor. Emma looked around the living room again, taking in the family photos, the well-worn furniture, the sense of a life lived and loved in this space. When she spoke again, her voice was small. I don't know how long it would be until I figure things out. However long it takes. And you really don't know anything about me. I could be anyone, Marcus shrugged. Could be. But my gut says you're not anyone dangerous. And I trust my gut. Emma was quiet again, and Marcus could see her struggling with the decision. Pride warred with necessity, and necessity was winning. Okay, she said finally, so quietly he almost missed it. Okay, but just temporarily, and I'll help however I can. Okay then. Marcus stood up and collected their empty plates. Let me show you to your room. As he led Emma upstairs, Marcus found himself wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. He'd lived alone for so long that having another person in the house, especially someone who was essentially a stranger, would be a major adjustment. But as he opened the door to the guest room that had once been his daughter's room, he realized he felt more alive than he had in months. The room was simple but comfortable, with a double bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the backyard where Sarah's old garden still grew wild. Emma stood in the doorway, taking it in. It's perfect, she said, and Marcus could hear the emotion in her voice. Bathroom's right across the hall. There are clean towels in the linen closet. You should get some rest, you've had a rough morning. Emma nodded, then turned to face him. Marcus? Thank you, really, I don't know how to repay this kindness. You don't need to repay anything. Just take care of yourself and that baby. As Marcus headed back downstairs, he realized he'd committed to something that would change both their lives. He had no idea what Emma's story really was, what had brought her to his porch, or what challenges lay ahead. But for the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like he was part of something larger than his own quiet, solitary existence. Upstairs, Emma sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming relief of finding unexpected kindness when she'd needed it most. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her. We're safe, she whispered. At least for now we're safe. Outside, the morning sun was burning off the last of the rain clouds, and Millbrook Falls was waking up to what would prove to be a day that changed everything. Though neither Marcus nor Emma knew it yet, their chance encounter would ripple through the small town in ways neither could imagine, touching lives and hearts in ways that would bring an entire community together. But that story was just beginning. 3 days passed in careful, tentative coexistence. Marcus adjusted his routines to accommodate having someone else in the house, while Emma moved through the space like a ghost, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. She cleaned obsessively, scrubbing floors that were already clean, organizing closets that didn't need organizing, washing dishes before they could accumulate in the sink. It was as if she believed that making herself useful enough might justify her presence. Marcus watched this frantic activity with growing concern. When he tried to tell her to take it easy, she would just nod and find something else to clean. She ate sparingly despite his encouragement, always asking permission before touching anything, always ready to flee at the first sign she wasn't wanted. On Thursday evening, Marcus returned from work to find Emma standing in the kitchen, staring at the empty refrigerator with a look of panic on her face. She'd used the last of the milk for his morning coffee and hadn't known what to do about it. I should have asked before using it, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. I'll find a way to replace it. Emma, it's milk. I was going to buy groceries anyway. Marcus hung up his jacket, noting how she flinched slightly when he moved too quickly. Want to come with me? You could pick out things you like. I don't want to be in any trouble. You're not in trouble. And you need to eat more than you have been. At Millbrook Market, the town's only grocery store, Marcus realized he'd made a tactical error. Millbrook Falls was the kind of place where a familiar face shopping with an unfamiliar young pregnant woman would generate immediate speculation. Sure enough, they hadn't been in the store 5 minutes before Dolores Patterson, the town's unofficial information hub, appeared at the end of their aisle. "Marcus Rodriguez, as I live and breathe," Dolores said, her eyes fixed on Emma with undisguised curiosity. "Don't think I've seen you around town in months." "Evening, Dolores." Marcus's tone was polite but cool. He'd never particularly enjoyed Dolores's talent for extracting personal information. "And who's this lovely young lady?" Dolores stepped closer, her smile bright and predatory. Emma shrank back slightly, and Marcus felt a protective instinct surge through him. "This is Emma Walsh. She's staying at my place for a while." The effect was immediate. Dolores's eyebrows shot up, and Marcus could practically see her mind racing with possibilities. A mysterious pregnant girl living with the town's most confirmed bachelor? This was gossip gold. "How wonderful," Dolores said, her voice saccharine. "And when are you due, dear?" "Soon," Emma murmured, her hands instinctively moving to her belly. "How exciting." "And is the father someone we know?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Marcus saw Emma's face go pale, saw her retreat into herself the way she did whenever anyone got too personal. "Dolores," Marcus said, his voice carrying a warning, "Emma's personal business is just that personal." But Dolores was like a dog with a bone. Of course. "I'm just concerned for the young lady's welfare. This is such a small town, and we like to know who's in our community. For safety, you understand." "She's perfectly safe," Marcus replied curtly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have shopping to finish." He guided Emma away, but the damage was done. For the rest of their shopping trip, Emma was silent and withdrawn. When they got home, she disappeared upstairs without a word. Marcus found her sitting on her bed an hour later, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "I'm sorry about Dolores," he said from the doorway. "She means well, but she doesn't know when to mind her own business. Everyone in town is going to think I'm your ... Emma couldn't finish the sentence. "My what?" "Your girlfriend, your mistress." Something inappropriate. Marcus considered this. "Let them think about what they want. People who know me know better." "But it could hurt your reputation." "Emma, I'm 53 years old. My reputation can handle whatever gossip Dolores Patterson wants to spread." He paused. "But I am worried about you. You've barely eaten anything today. I'm not very hungry." "That's not good for the baby." Emma's hands moved to her belly again, and Marcus saw her expression soften slightly. "I know, I just ... When people start asking questions, it makes me nervous." "Want to talk about it?" Emma was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I grew up in foster care. Aged out of the system when I turned 18 with nowhere to go and no real skills. I was living in Pittsburgh, working at a diner, trying to save money for community college." She paused, her fingers twisting in the bedsheet. "I met someone. He seemed nice at first. Older, established. He said he loved me, wanted to take care of me." Marcus felt his stomach tighten, sensing where this story was headed. Things were good for a while. "He got me a better apartment, bought me things, but then he started getting possessive. Jealous. He didn't want me working, didn't want me having friends, said he'd take care of everything." Emma's voice grew smaller. "When I found out I was pregnant, I thought maybe it would change things. Make him happy, but it didn't. It made everything worse. He got angry, said the baby would ruin everything he built for us. He wanted me to ... double quotes, she couldn't say the words. You don't have to tell me this if it's too hard. I need to tell someone." Emma looked at him with those two old eyes. "When I refused, he got violent. Really violent. I ended up in the emergency room, and that's when I knew I had to leave. I took what little money I'd managed to hide away and got on a bus. I didn't even know where I was going, just somewhere he couldn't find me. And you ended up here. The bus broke down in Millbrook Falls 3 days ago. I was sleeping in the park, but when it started raining..." She shrugged helplessly. Marcus felt a familiar rage building in his chest, the same anger he'd felt watching Sarah suffer through cancer. Treatments, the helpless fury at life's unfairness. But he kept his voice calm. "He doesn't know where you are." "I don't think so. I paid cash for the bus ticket and used a fake name. But I'm scared he might try to find me." "What's his name?" Emma hesitated. "Why?" "Because if he shows up here, I want to know who I'm dealing with. Derek Hoffman." "But please, Marcus, I don't want any trouble." "If he found me here, if he hurt you because of me, he won't hurt me. And he sure as hell won't hurt you again, not while you're under my roof." The conviction in Marcus's voice seemed to surprise Emma. She studied his face, perhaps seeing something there that reminded her what safety could look like. "I can't stay here forever," she said. "You can stay as long as you need to." "But Emma, you need to start taking better care of yourself. And that means eating regularly and seeing a doctor." "I told you, I can't afford." Dr. Patricia Henley has been taking care of folks in this town for 30 years. She delivers most of the babies born in Millbrook Falls, and she's never turned anyone away for lack of money. "We're going to see her tomorrow." Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's tone told her this wasn't negotiable. The next morning, Dr. Henley's office was busy with the usual mix of elderly patients and young mothers. Marcus had called ahead, explaining the situation in general terms, and Patricia had agreed to see Emma right away. Dr. Patricia Henley was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the no-nonsense manner of someone who'd delivered over 1,000 babies. She took one look at Emma's gaunt face and immediately ushered her into an exam room. "Marcus Rodriguez," she said after the examination, finding him in the waiting room. "That girl is severely malnourished and exhausted. When did she last see a doctor?" "I'm not sure she's seen one at all during this pregnancy." Dr. Henley's expression darkened. "She's measuring at about 35 weeks, which means this baby could come any time. Her blood pressure is elevated, and she's anemic. She needs immediate nutritional support and complete rest." "What does that mean?" "It means bed rest, proper meals, prenatal vitamins, and close monitoring. She also needs to register at the hospital for delivery." Dr. Henley paused. "Marcus, I've known you since Sarah was pregnant with Jessica. You're a good man, but are you prepared for what you're taking on here?" Marcus thought about Emma's frightened eyes, about the careful way she moved through his house as if she expected to be thrown out at any moment. "I'm prepared to do whatever she needs. This isn't just about providing a place to stay. If her blood pressure doesn't stabilize, she could develop preeclampsia. That's life-threatening for both mother and baby. And given her history..." Dr. Henley lowered her voice. "She told me about the domestic violence. She's going to need counseling, emotional support. This baby is going to need a safe, stable environment. She have that." Dr. Henley studied his face. "You've gotten attached to her." It wasn't a question, and Marcus didn't try to deny it. In just a few days, Emma had somehow filled a space in his life he hadn't even realized was empty. Not romantically, she was young enough to be his daughter, but something deeper than that. A sense of purpose, maybe. A reason to care about something beyond his own solitary existence. "She reminds me of Jessica at that age," he said finally. "Proud, scared, trying to handle everything on her own. Jessica had you and Sarah. This girl has no one. She has me now." When they got home, Marcus made Emma lie down while he prepared lunch. As he cooked, he thought about Dr. Henley's words. What was he taking on? He'd invited a homeless pregnant teenager to live in his house without knowing anything about her, except that she needed help. Now he was learning that her needs went far beyond a roof over her head. But as he carried a tray upstairs and found Emma fast asleep, her face finally peaceful, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. This girl, this child, really had been failed by every system that should have protected her. Her family, the foster care system, the man who should have loved her. Marcus couldn't fix all of that, but he could give her what she needed most: safety and unconditional support. That evening, as Emma picked at her dinner, Marcus made a decision. "Tomorrow we're going shopping," he announced. "We just went shopping. For baby things, clothes, a crib, whatever you need." Emma's fork clattered against her plate. "Marcus, I can't let you buy all that. It's too much. It's not too much. Every baby deserves to come into the world with people who want them. But what if Derek finds me? What if I have to leave suddenly? Then you'll take everything with you." "But Emma, I don't think you're going to have to run anymore. How can you be so sure?" Marcus thought about this small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, where strangers were noticed immediately, where a network of busybodies like Dolores Patterson made it virtually impossible for someone to hide. Because Millbrook Falls protects its own. And whether you realize it or not, you're one of us now. Emma stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 8 years ago, when Sarah was dying, this whole town rallied around us. Neighbors brought meals, folks took shifts sitting with her so I could work. People I barely knew showed up at her funeral. I've never forgotten that kindness." Marcus reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Now it's my turn to pass it forward." That night, Emma lay in bed feeling the baby move restlessly inside her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe she could stop running. Maybe this baby could have the kind of safe, loving childhood she'd never had. Outside her window, the lights of Millbrook Falls twinkled like stars, and Emma finally began to believe that she might have found something she'd never had before: a home. But Derek Hoffman had not given up his search as easily as Emma hoped. And the peaceful life she was beginning to build was about to face its greatest test. Saturday morning brought the first real test of Marcus's commitment to helping Emma. They'd driven to Riverside Mall, 30 minutes outside Millbrook Falls, to shop for baby supplies. Marcus had insisted on going somewhere beyond the reach of local gossip, wanting Emma to feel comfortable without worrying about curious stares. Walking through the baby store, Marcus watched Emma's amazement at the sheer variety of items available. She touched everything with wonder-tiny onesies, soft blankets, colorful mobiles that played gentle lullabies. But when sales associates approached offering help, she immediately deferred to Marcus, as if she had no right to make decisions about her own child's needs. "What kind of crib do you like?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the display models. "I don't know anything about cribs," Emma admitted quietly. "I never thought I'd actually be able to afford one." They spent 2 hours in the store, with Marcus patiently explaining the purpose of various items while Emma slowly began to participate in the decision-making process. By the time they loaded the car with a crib, changing table, clothes in newborn and 3-month sizes, and enough diapers to stock a small daycare, Emma was glowing with an excitement Marcus hadn't seen before. "I can't believe this is really happening," she said as they drove home. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's real," Marcus assured her, "and it's just the beginning." But when they pulled into the driveway, Marcus's good mood evaporated. A sleek black sedan with Pennsylvania plates was parked across the street, and a man in an expensive suit was standing on Marcus's front porch, peering through the windows. Emma saw him at the same time Marcus did, and the color drained from her face completely. "Derek," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man turned as they approached, and Marcus got his first look at Derek Hoffman. Tall, broad-shouldered, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of predatory smile that made Marcus's skin crawl. He was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 35, and carried himself with the arrogant confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. "There's my girl," Derek called out, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "Emma, sweetheart. You've led me on quite a chase." Emma shrank back in her seat, instinctively trying to make herself smaller. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't face him." "You don't have to," Marcus said quietly. "Stay in the car and lock the doors. I'll handle this. Marcus, please be careful. He's dangerous when he's angry." Marcus studied Derek's seemingly friendly demeanor and relaxed posture. This wasn't a man in a rage. This was someone who thought he was in complete control of the situation. That made him even more dangerous. "Mr. Hoffman, I presume," Marcus said, getting out of the car but leaving the door open so he could hear. "Emma, if she needed him." "Derek Hoffman," the younger man confirmed, extending his hand with practiced charm. "And you must be the good Samaritan who's been taking care of my Emma. I can't tell you how grateful I am." Marcus didn't take the offered hand. "She's not your Emma." Derek's smile flickered, but didn't disappear. "I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding. Emma is my fiancée. She's been having some emotional difficulties with the pregnancy, and she ran off during a particularly bad episode. I've been worried sick." Funny, that's not how she tells it. "Well, pregnant women can be quite dramatic, as I'm sure you know. Hormones and all that." Derek's tone remained conversational, but Marcus caught the edge beneath it. "The important thing is that I found her, and now I can take her home where she belongs." "She is home." Derek's facade slipped slightly. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. Emma is carrying my child. She needs proper medical care, a stable environment. I'm sure you mean well, but a bachelor living alone can hardly provide what she needs. She's been seeing Dr. Patricia Henley, one of the best obstetricians in the region. Her needs are being met just fine. Look, Mr. ... Derek paused expectantly. "Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate everything you've done for Emma, truly, but she belongs with me. We have a life together, plans for our future." Derek glanced toward the car where Emma sat frozen. "Emma, honey, come out so we can talk properly." Emma didn't move, didn't even look in Derek's direction. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Marcus observed. "She's confused, scared. The pregnancy has been hard on her emotionally." Derek's voice took on a note of manufactured concern. "She needs professional help, specialized care. I've already made arrangements with a facility in Pittsburgh that specializes in high-risk pregnancies and postpartum depression." The way Derek said facility made Marcus's blood run cold. "You mean a psychiatric hospital? A treatment center where she can get the help she needs?" Marcus glanced back at Emma, who was watching this exchange with growing terror. The pieces clicked into place. Derek wasn't just an abusive boyfriend. He was someone with enough money and connections to have Emma declared mentally unstable and committed. Once he had legal control over her, he could make her disappear entirely. "She's not going anywhere with you," Marcus said firmly. Derek's smile finally disappeared completely. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm trying to be reasonable here, but my patience has limits. Emma is my responsibility, and I won't allow some stranger to interfere with her care." "Your responsibility? Is that what you call putting her in the hospital?" "Accidents happen when someone is emotionally unstable. That's exactly why she needs proper supervision." The casual way Derek admitted to hurting Emma made Marcus's hands clench into fists. But he forced himself to stay calm. Derek was trying to provoke him, probably hoping to paint Marcus as the unstable one. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said quietly. "You're going to get in your car and leave. If you come back, I'm calling the police." Derek laughed, a sound without humor. "And tell them what?" "That you're harboring someone else's pregnant fiancée. I have documentation proving our relationship, Mr. Rodriguez. Photos, Witness statements. Medical records showing her history of mental instability. What do you have? Marcus realized with growing dread that Derek had come prepared for this confrontation. He'd probably been planning for the possibility that Emma might run, had already built a legal case to get her back. I have her word that she doesn't want to go with you. The word of an emotionally disturbed pregnant woman against documented evidence. Good luck with that. Derek straightened his suit jacket. I'm going to give you one chance to do this the easy way. Convince Emma to come with me voluntarily, and we can all pretend this little adventure never happened. Refuse, and I'll have the police here within an hour with a court order. You're bluffing. Derek pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a document on the screen. Temporary custody order filed yesterday in Allegheny County. Emma Walsh, also known as Emma Davidson, that's her real name, by the way, is to be remanded to my custody, pending psychological evaluation. I have friends in the family court system, Mr. Rodriguez, very good friends. Marcus stared at the official-looking document, feeling the situation slipping away from him. Derek wasn't just some abusive boyfriend, he was someone with resources, connections, and a plan. He'd been preparing for this moment from the day Emma left. Emma, Derek called toward the car, his voice switching back to false concern. Sweetheart, this is getting unnecessarily complicated. Just come home with me, and we can work everything out. Emma finally moved, rolling down the car window just enough to speak. I won't go back to you, Derek. I'd rather die first. Don't be so dramatic, honey. You're not thinking clearly right now, but that's okay. That's why you need help. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. You hurt me, Derek. You hurt our baby. I never laid a hand on you, Emma. Ask anyone who knows us. Derek's voice carried a note of injured innocence that would have been convincing to anyone who didn't know better. You fell down the stairs because you were having one of your episodes. That's why you ended up in the hospital. Marcus saw Emma flinch at Derek's version of events, and he realized this was probably a narrative Derek had been crafting for months. Make Emma doubt her own memories, gaslight her into believing she was the problem. She fell down the stairs because you pushed her, Marcus said. Can you prove that? Derek challenged. Because I have security footage from our building showing Emma stumbling and falling on her own. I have witness statements from neighbors who heard her talking to herself, acting erratically. I have medical records documenting her depression and anxiety. Marcus felt the trap closing around them. Derek had systematically built a case painting Emma as mentally unstable while positioning himself as the concerned partner trying to get her help. Even if Marcus called the police right now, who would they believe? A well-dressed businessman with documentation, or a pregnant teenager with no resources and a history Derek had probably fabricated? Time's up, Mr. Rodriguez, Derek said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling this now, wait. Marcus looked back at Emma, who was crying silently in the car. He thought about Dr. Henley's words about Emma needing stability and support. He thought about his promise to protect her. And he thought about something Derek didn't know, that Millbrook Falls was the kind of town where people protected their own. Give me 5 minutes, Marcus said. Let me talk to her. Derek checked his expensive watch. 5 minutes. Then I'm making the call. Marcus walked back to the car and opened Emma's door. She looked up at him with eyes full of despair. He's going to take me back, she whispered. He's going to put me in some hospital where no one will ever find me. No, he's not. You heard what he said. He has court orders, documentation. Nobody's going to believe me over him. Marcus knelt beside the car so they were at eye level. Emma, do you trust me? Yes. Then I need you to do exactly what I tell you, okay? Get out of the car and walk into the house. Go upstairs to your room and stay there no matter what happens out here. But Derek, let me worry about Derek. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded, wiping her tears. She got out of the car and walked toward the house without looking at Derek, though Marcus could see her trembling. Emma, Derek called after her. "This doesn't have to be difficult, sweetheart. Just come home with me." Emma disappeared into the house, and Marcus turned back to Derek. "She's made her choice," Marcus said. "Her choice doesn't matter. The law is on my side." Derek started dialing his phone. "Go ahead and call," Marcus said. "But you might want to know something first." Derek paused. "What?" "Emma told me all about you, Derek. About how you isolated her, controlled her money, hurt her when she didn't do what you wanted. And you know what? I believed every word. Her word against mine, not just her word." Marcus gestured toward the houses around them. "This is a small town, Derek. People notice things. Mrs. Chun next door has been watching through her window since you arrived. Old Bill Morrison across the street has been pretending to work in his garden while keeping an eye on our conversation. And that woman walking her dog? That's Carol Jensen, who happens to work at the courthouse." Derek glanced around, suddenly noticing the audience Marcus had identified. "They've all seen you threatening a pregnant woman, Derek. They've heard you admit to putting her in the hospital. Small-town folks have long memories and strong opinions about men who hurt women. That won't hold up in court. Maybe not. But it will make for interesting local news coverage. Businessman stalks pregnant ex to small town. I'm sure your friends in the family court system would love reading about that in the regional papers." Derek's confidence wavered slightly. "You're bluffing, am I? Carol Jensen's husband owns the Sim local newspaper. Mrs. Chun's daughter is a lawyer in Philadelphia. Bill Morrison's grandson works for Channel 8 News in Pittsburgh." Marcus stepped closer to Derek. "See, that's the thing about small towns. Everyone's connected to everyone else. You hurt one of us, you hurt all of us. Emma isn't one of you. She's been here for what, a week? She's pregnant and needs help. That makes her one of us automatically." Derek looked around again, noticing for the first time that their conversation had indeed drawn attention. Windows had curtains pulled back slightly, and the number of people finding reasons to be outside had increased dramatically. "This isn't over," Derek said. But some of the bravado had gone out of his voice. "Yes, it is." Marcus's voice was calm, but implacable. "Emma doesn't want to go with you. She's found a safe place here, and we're going to make sure she stays safe. If you try to force the issue, you'll find out just how protective small-town people can be." Derek stared at Marcus for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. He still had his legal documentation, but Marcus was right about one thing bad. Publicity could damage his carefully constructed image. And there was something in Marcus's calm certainty that suggested he wasn't entirely bluffing about the town's support. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Derek said finally. "I know exactly what I'm interfering with, and I'm proud of it." Derek got into his car but rolled down the window before driving away. "This isn't over, Rodriguez. Emma belongs to me, and I always get what belongs to me." As the black sedan disappeared down Maple Street, Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. He'd won this round, but Derek's parting words suggested the fight was far from over. When Marcus went inside, he found Emma sitting on the stairs, shaking. "Is he gone?" she asked. "For now, he'll be back." He meant what he said about those court orders. Marcus sat down beside her on the steps. "Then we'll be ready for him." "How?" "You heard what he said. He has friends, money, documentation. What do we have?" Marcus thought about the faces he'd seen watching from windows, about the way Carol Jensen had lingered longer than necessary walking her dog, about Mrs. Chun's protective glare toward Derek's car. "We have something Derek doesn't understand," Marcus said. "We have a community. What does that mean?" "It means you're not facing this alone anymore, Emma, and neither am I." As if to prove his point, the doorbell rang. When Marcus answered it, he found Mrs. Chun standing on his porch with a casserole dish. "I brought dinner," she said simply, "and I wanted to make sure that young woman was all right. I saw that man bothering her." Behind Mrs. Chun, Marcus could see Bill Morrison approaching with his wife, and Carol Jensen walking back up the street with purposeful steps. "Looks like the neighborhood watch committee is assembling," Marcus observed. "Is that what we're calling it?" Mrs. Chun smiled grimly. "I like that better than nosy busybodies." As more neighbors gathered on Marcus's front porch, Emma watched from the living room window in amazement. These people didn't even know her, but they were rallying to her defense simply because she needed help. For the first time since Derek had appeared, Emma began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she really had found sanctuary. And Derek Hoffman was about to learn that taking on one person in Millbrook Falls meant taking on the entire town. By Sunday evening, Marcus's living room had been transformed into an impromptu war room. Carol Jensen sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, researching Pennsylvania family law while her husband Tom scribbled notes about Derek's legal vulnerabilities. Mrs. Chun had appointed herself as Emma's personal bodyguard, rarely leaving her side and teaching her basic self-defense moves just in case. Bill Morrison had recruited his retired police officer brother-in-law to run background checks on Derek Hoffman, and the results were disturbing. Derek Hoffman, 34, owns 3 luxury car dealerships in the Pittsburgh area. Retired Detective Ray Morrison announced to the assembled group. No criminal record, but there are some interesting patterns. 3 previous girlfriends filed restraining orders against him in the past 5 years. All 3 orders were later dropped, and all 3 women received generous financial settlements from Derek's company. Emma, who had been quietly listening from the couch, went pale. He bought them off. "Looks that way," Ray confirmed gently. "Classic pattern for someone with money and influence. Make the problem go away with cash and legal pressure." "What about the court documents he showed Marcus?" Tom Jensen asked. Carol looked up from her laptop. "I checked with my contacts in Allegheny County. There's no record of any custody order or psychological evaluation request filed for Emma Walsh or Emma Davidson." Derek was lying. The relief that washed over Emma's face was visible to everyone in the room. "So he can't just take me? Not legally, no. But that doesn't mean he won't try other methods," Ray warned. "Men like Derek don't give up easily, especially when their control is challenged publicly." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown local number. "Marcus Rodriguez," he answered, putting the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is attorney James Mitchell from Mitchell Stevens & Associates. I represent Mr. Derek Hoffman in a family matter involving Emma Davidson." The room went silent. Emma gripped Mrs. Chun's hand tightly. "What can I do for you, Mr. Mitchell?" "My client is prepared to resolve this situation amicably. He's willing to compensate you for your expenses in caring for Miss Davidson and ensure there are no legal complications arising from this misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, and Emma isn't for sale." "I think you may be misunderstanding the gravity of the situation. Mr. Rodriguez, my client has significant resources and legitimate concerns about Miss Davidson's mental health and the welfare of his unborn child." Carol Jensen grabbed a legal pad and started writing furiously, signaling for Marcus to keep the lawyer talking. "Miss Davidson is in excellent health and receiving proper medical care," Marcus replied. "She's made it clear she doesn't want any contact with your client. Miss Davidson is not competent to make such decisions in her current state. Mr. Hoffman has documentation from multiple medical professionals attesting to her need for supervised care." "Funny thing about that," Tom Jensen interjected, leaning toward the phone. "We've checked with Allegheny County, and there are no court orders or medical holds on file for Emma Walsh or Emma Davidson." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Who am I speaking with?" "Tom Jensen, publisher of the Millbrook Falls Gazette. I'm recording this conversation for a story I'm writing about out-of-town businessmen harassing pregnant women in our community." Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Rodriguez, I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. My client is prepared to pursue all legal avenues to protect his interests. And we're prepared to protect ours, Marcus replied. Good evening, Mr. Mitchell. After Marcus hung up, Ray Morrison shook his head grimly. Derek's escalating. First, the intimidation, now the lawyers. Next will probably be private investigators, maybe harassment charges. Can he do that? Emma asked, her voice small. He can try, Carol said, looking up from her notes. But I've been researching Pennsylvania domestic violence laws, and there are protections available. We just need to get ahead of this. What kind of protections? Restraining orders, emergency custody provisions, safe harbor laws. But Emma, you'd need to file official reports about the abuse. That means going on record, possibly testifying in court. Emma shrank back into the couch cushions. Derek said no one would believe me. He said he had witnesses who would testify that I was unstable. Paid witnesses aren't worth much when you have a whole town backing you up, Mrs. Chen said firmly. And Dr. Henley's medical records will show you're perfectly sane. Bill Morrison cleared his throat. There's something else we need to consider. Derek's not just going to give up and go away. Men like him don't handle rejection well, especially public rejection. He's going to want revenge. What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean he's going to try to hurt Emma in ways that can't be traced back to him. Discredit her, isolate her, make her life so miserable she comes crawling back to him voluntarily. As if to prove Bill's point, Emma's phone, which she'd kept turned off since arriving in Millbrook Falls, suddenly started, buzzing with notifications. She'd turned it on earlier to call Dr. Henley's office, and apparently Derek had been busy. Dozens of text messages flooded in, along with voicemails and social media notifications. The messages started loving and pleading, then gradually turned darker and more threatening. Photos of Emma taken without her knowledge, screenshots of her social media posts with cruel commentary, messages claiming she was a thief who'd stolen money from Derek's business. He's posting lies about me online, Emma said, scrolling through the notifications with shaking hands. He's telling people I'm a drug addict, that I stole from him, that the baby isn't even his. Mrs. Chun took the phone gently but firmly. Stop reading those. It's all lies, and reading them will just upset you and the baby. But what if people believe him? What if everyone thinks, Emma, Carol interrupted. Look around this room. Do any of us look like we believe Derek's lies? Emma glanced around. At the faces surrounding her, Marcus's quiet determination, Mrs. Chun's fierce protectiveness, the Jensen's professional focus, Bill and Ray Morrison's solid reliability. These people barely knew her, but they were treating her like family. Why are you all helping me? She asked, tears in her eyes. I'm nobody special. I don't have anything to offer you. The question hung in the air for a moment before Marcus answered. 8 years ago, when my wife Sarah was dying, I thought I was going to face it alone. Jessica was in California with her own family. My parents were gone. And I figured that's just how life worked. You handle your problems by yourself. Marcus's voice was quiet, but steady. But this town wouldn't let me face it alone. People I barely knew showed up at my door with food, offers to help, shoulders to cry on. They didn't do it because I was special, or because I could pay them back. They did it because that's what communities do. They take care of their own. But I'm not from here. You are now, Mrs. Chun said simply. The moment you needed help and Marcus opened his door, you became one of us. Bill Morrison nodded. Besides, Derek made this personal when he threatened Marcus on a public street. Nobody threatens our neighbors and gets away with it. Ray leaned forward. There's also the principle of the thing. Men like Derek think they can use money and power to hurt people without consequences. Sometimes they need to learn that's not how the world works. Tom Jensen looked up from his notes. I've been covering this town for 15 years, and I've seen what happens when we let bullies win. They don't stop with one victim. They keep going until someone stops them. Emma wiped her tears, feeling something shift inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she wasn't facing a crisis alone. These people weren't just offering help, they were offering to fight alongside her. What do we do? She asked. Carol closed her laptop decisively. We go on the offensive. Tomorrow morning, we file for a restraining order against Derek. We document everything, the harassment, the threats, the online campaign. We make sure everyone in town knows what's really happening, so Derek can't control the narrative. I'll run a front-page story in Wednesday's paper, Tom added. Local woman finds sanctuary from abusive ex. Let Derek try to spin that. Ray pulled out his phone. I still have contacts in the Pittsburgh PD. Let me make some calls, see what the unofficial word is on Derek Hoffman. Sometimes the things that don't make it into official records are the most telling. As the evening wore on, the group refined their strategy. Mrs. Chun would stay with Emma during the day while Marcus worked. The Jensens would handle media and legal research. The Morrison brothers would coordinate with law enforcement and gather intelligence on Derek's activities, but their planning was interrupted by a knock at the door. Marcus peered through the curtains and saw a young woman he didn't recognize, standing on his porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I don't know her, Marcus said quietly. Ray moved to a position where he could see the front door while staying out of sight. Could be one of Derek's people. But when Marcus opened the door, the woman's first words dispelled that concern. Are you the man helping Emma Davidson? She asked urgently. The pregnant girl who escaped from Derek Hoffman. Who's asking? My name is Sarah Beth Williams. Derek Hoffman destroyed my life 2 years ago, and I heard through social media that he's trying to do the same thing to someone else. The woman's hands were shaking. I need to tell you what he's really capable of. Marcus invited Sarah Beth inside, and her story unfolded like a nightmare preview of what Emma might have faced. Derek had isolated her from friends and family, controlled her finances, and when she tried to leave, he'd systematically destroyed her reputation and career. The restraining order she'd filed had been dropped after Derek's lawyers made it clear they would drag her through years of expensive litigation she couldn't afford. He has people, Sarah Beth explained. Private investigators, lawyers, even a few cops who owe him favors. When I tried to rebuild my life in Philadelphia, suddenly I couldn't get jobs, couldn't rent apartments. Everywhere I went, someone had gotten there first with stories about my mental instability and criminal history. Criminal history? Emma asked. All fabricated, but convincing enough to scare employers and landlords. Derek's very good at creating false narratives that are hard to disprove. Sarah Beth turned to Emma with urgent intensity. That's why I came here. When I saw online that he was targeting someone else, I had to warn you. He won't stop with threats and lawyers. He'll try to destroy everything good in your life until you have nowhere else to turn. The room fell silent as the implications of Sarah Beth's warning sank in. Derek wasn't just trying to get Emma back, he was waging a psychological war designed to break her spirit completely. How did you escape him? Mrs. Chun asked quietly. I didn't, not really. I changed my name, moved across the country, started over with nothing. But I'm always looking over my shoulder, always afraid he'll find me again. Sarah Beth looked around the room at the faces of Emma's supporters. But you have something I didn't have. You have people willing to fight for you. Ray Morrison leaned forward. Sarah Beth, would you be willing to testify about Derek's pattern of behavior? Your testimony could be crucial in getting Emma legal protection. Sarah Beth hesitated, fear warring with determination on her face. If it would help stop him from hurting someone else, yes, I'll testify. As Sarah Beth shared detailed accounts of Derek's methods, the fake job references, the manufactured crisis, the way he used the legal system as a weapon, Emma felt both terrified and oddly relieved. At least now she knew what she was facing. "There's something else," Sarah Beth said as the evening wound down. "Derek's not acting alone. He has a whole network of people who help him, lawyers who file frivolous lawsuits, private investigators who manufacture evidence, even a therapist who'll write whatever psychological evaluation Derek pays for." "How is that possible?" Carol asked. "Money and favors. Derek's very good at making himself useful to people, then calling in those debts when he needs something." Sarah Beth gathered her courage. "But that network can be exposed if you're willing to fight dirty." Marcus looked around the room at his neighbors and friends, seeing the same determination in their faces that he felt in his own heart. Derek Hoffman had picked the wrong town to terrorize. "Then we fight dirty," Marcus said simply. As the group dispersed for the night, Emma felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Derek was more dangerous than she'd ever imagined, but she was no longer facing him alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, for the first time in months, she felt like she might actually win this fight. Derek Hoffman was about to learn that Millbrook Falls didn't back down from bullies. No matter how much money they had or how powerful they thought they were. The battle for Emma's freedom was just beginning, and the entire town was choosing sides. Monday morning brought unexpected complications. Marcus woke to find 3 news vans parked outside his house and reporters already knocking on doors throughout the neighborhood. Derek had made his next move overnight, and it was more sophisticated than anyone had anticipated. "Mr. Rodriguez," called a perfectly coiffed reporter as Marcus stepped onto his porch. "Channel 8 News. Can you comment on allegations that you're harboring a fugitive with serious mental health issues?" Marcus slammed the door and immediately called Tom Jensen. "Tom, we have a problem, I know." Derek's people got to the Pittsburgh media first. "They're running a story about a concerning situation in Millbrook Falls involving a vulnerable pregnant woman being held against her will by well-meaning but misguided locals." The narrative Derek had crafted was insidious in its effectiveness. Rather than painting himself as the obvious villain, he'd positioned Marcus and the town as misguided kidnappers who were preventing a pregnant woman from receiving proper medical care. The story included carefully edited statements from medical professionals expressing concern about Emma's well-being, and even featured tearful interviews with Derek pleading for his fiancée's safe return. Emma watched the news coverage from Marcus's living room, her face growing paler with each report. "He's making me look like a victim who doesn't know her own mind," she whispered. "People are going to think I'm crazy." Mrs. Chun, who had arrived early with breakfast and reassurance, snorted derisively. "Let them come here and see for themselves how crazy you are. One conversation with you, and anybody with half a brain will see through Derek's lies." But the media blitz was having its intended effect. Marcus's phone rang constantly with reporters requesting interviews, social workers asking about welfare checks, and even a few angry callers who believed Derek's version of events. The peaceful sanctuary they'd built around Emma was being systematically dismantled by professionals who specialized in manipulating public opinion. Dr. Patricia Henley arrived at the house around noon, pushing through the gaggle of reporters with the no-nonsense authority of someone who'd been delivering babies when most of them were still in diapers. "This is ridiculous," she announced, settling into Marcus's living room. "I've been Emma's physician for a week now, and she's one of the most mentally stable pregnant women I've ever treated. Considering what she's been through, her emotional resilience is remarkable." "Would you be willing to say that publicly?" Carol Jensen asked. She'd been fielding media calls all morning, trying to counter Derek's narrative with facts. "Already did. I gave an interview to Channel 8 20 minutes ago. Told them that any suggestion Emma needs psychiatric intervention is medical malpractice at best, outright fraud at worst." Emma looked up with hope. "What did they say?" They said they'd take my comments under advisement and present a balanced perspective. Dr. Henley's tone made it clear what she thought of their journalistic integrity. But here's the thing, Derek's made a tactical error. He's brought medical professionals into this fight, and we don't like being lied to. As if to emphasize her point, Dr. Henley's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and smiled grimly. That's Dr. Michael Crawford from Pittsburgh General. He's the psychiatrist who supposedly evaluated Emma and recommended her commitment. Interesting thing is, he's never heard of Emma Davidson and never spoke to Derek Hoffman. He's filing a complaint with the state medical board this afternoon. The tide was beginning to turn, but Derek had more resources than anyone had anticipated. By mid-afternoon, Child Protective Services had arrived to investigate reports of an unfit environment for an unborn child. The caseworker, a harried-looking woman named Janet Morrison, seemed genuinely surprised by what she found. I was told there were concerns about substance abuse, unsafe living conditions, and psychological instability, Janet said, looking around Marcus's immaculate house. This is nothing like what was reported. Emma sat calmly in the living room, answering Janet's questions with the patient grace of someone who'd been through the foster care system and knew how to handle official inquiries. Her medical records from Dr. Henley showed excellent prenatal care. Her living situation was clearly stable and supportive, and her mental state was obviously sound. Miss Davidson, Janet said after completing her assessment, I have to ask, do you feel safe here? Are you being coerced or pressured in any way? This is the safest I've felt in over a year, Emma replied honestly. These people saved my life. Janet closed her folder. I'll be filing a report recommending case closure. Whoever made these allegations either has seriously inaccurate information or is deliberately filing false reports. But Derek wasn't finished. As Janet left, Ray Morrison arrived with disturbing news from his contacts in Pittsburgh. Derek's hired Blackstone Investigations, Ray announced. They're the kind of private security firm that specializes in corporate espionage and reputation management. Very expensive, very thorough, and not particularly concerned with legal niceties. What does that mean for us? Marcus asked. It means they're probably already here, gathering intelligence on everyone who's helping Emma. Phone records, financial information, personal history, anything they can use as leverage or ammunition. As if summoned by Ray's warning, Marcus's doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase and wearing the kind of bland, forgettable expression that screamed, professional investigator. Mr. Rodriguez? My name is Agent Thompson from the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services. We've received serious allegations about improper medical care being provided to a pregnant minor, and I need to speak with Emma Davidson. Immediately, Marcus kept the chain lock engaged. Do you have identification and a warrant? This is a welfare check, sir. I don't need a warrant to ensure the safety of a vulnerable individual. Ray Morrison appeared at Marcus's shoulder and studied the man's credentials through the gap in the door. After 30 years in law enforcement, Ray had developed a sixth sense for fake badges and phony officials. That's interesting, Ray said loudly enough for the fake agent to hear. Because the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services doesn't have agents, and their investigators don't conduct evening welfare checks without local law enforcement present. The man's professional composure slipped slightly. I'm afraid you're mistaken, sir. No, I'm afraid you're the one who's mistaken. Ray pulled out his phone and started dialing. Let me call the Pennsylvania State Police and have them verify your credentials. I'm sure they'd be very interested in someone impersonating a state official. The fake agent backed away from the door. That won't be necessary. There seems to have been some confusion about jurisdiction. I'll follow up through proper channels. As the man hurried away, Ray shook his head. Derek's getting desperate. Sending fake officials to intimidate Emma into leaving voluntarily is The kind of stunt that could land him in federal prison. But the constant pressure was taking its toll on Emma. Despite the support surrounding her, the stress of being under siege was affecting her health. Dr. Henley had already warned that. Her blood pressure was elevated, and the relentless media attention was making it worse. "I should just go," Emma said that evening as the group gathered once again in Marcus's living room. "Derek's not going to stop, and he's going to destroy all of your lives trying to get to me." "Absolutely not," Mrs. Chun said firmly. "Running away is exactly what Derek wants. The moment you leave here, he wins. But look what he's doing to everyone. The reporters, the fake officials, the lies on the news. How long before he finds ways to hurt all of you personally?" Sarah Beth Williams, who had been staying at a local bed and breakfast while helping with Emma's case, leaned forward. "Emma, I ran from Derek for 2 years. Every time I found a safe place, every time I started to build a new life, he found ways to destroy it. Running doesn't work with men like him. It just teaches them that their tactics are effective." "Then what's the alternative?" Carol Jensen looked up from her laptop, where she'd been working on legal strategies all evening. "We expose him completely. Turn his own tactics against him." "How?" "Derek's power comes from operating in shadows, using intermediaries and false narratives. But he's made himself a public figure now by going to the media. That means he's vulnerable to the same kind of exposure he's been using against his victims." Tom Jensen nodded. "I've been researching Derek's business practices, and there are some interesting patterns. 3 of his ex-girlfriends received settlements from his company, but those settlements came with non-disclosure agreements. If we can get even one of them to break their NDA and go public ... why would they risk it?" Emma asked. "Because NDAs don't protect criminal activity," Carol explained. "If Derek used illegal methods to silence his victims, those agreements are void. And thanks to Sarah Beth's testimony, we can establish a pattern of criminal behavior." Ray Morrison had been quietly making phone calls in the corner. Now he rejoined the group with news that changed everything. "I've been talking to contacts in Pittsburgh, and Derek Hoffman is not as untouchable as he thinks. The FBI has been investigating financial irregularities at his dealerships for the past 6 months. Something about insurance fraud and money laundering through vehicle sales." The room went silent as the implications sank in. Derek wasn't just an abusive boyfriend with money. He was potentially a federal criminal. "What does that mean for Emma?" Marcus asked. "It means Derek has bigger problems than one pregnant ex-girlfriend. If the FBI is building a case against him, he can't afford to be in the spotlight drawing attention to his activities." Sarah Beth's eyes lit up with something that looked like hope for the first time since she'd arrived. "If Derek's under federal investigation, that explains why he's been so aggressive about getting Emma back. She might know something that could hurt him." Emma looked confused. "I don't know anything about his business. He never talked to me about work." "Think, Emma," Sarah Beth urged. "Did you ever overhear phone calls, see documents? Maybe something that seemed innocent at the time, but could be significant now?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, her hands resting on her belly as she thought back to her months with Derek. Gradually her expression changed. "There were meetings," she said slowly. "Late at night, sometimes on weekends. Men who didn't look like car dealers. Derek would send me to my room when they came over, but I could hear them talking through the walls." "What did they talk about?" "Numbers mostly, serial numbers, VIN numbers, shipping dates, and cash transactions." Derek was always very specific about everything being cash only. Emma paused, remembering. "One night I heard them arguing about clean titles, and someone being too greedy with the markups." Ray exchanged a look with Carol Jensen. "Emma, did Derek ever ask you to sign papers? Maybe told you they were insurance forms or registration documents?" "Yes, lots of them. He said it was for my protection, so I'd be covered under his business insurance." Emma's face went pale as She realized what she might have been involved in. Did I help him commit crimes? If you signed papers without knowing what they were, you're a victim, not an accomplice, Carol assured her. But those signatures might be evidence that could help the FBI build their case. The group spent the next hour helping Emma reconstruct everything she could remember about Derek's business activities. The picture that emerged was of a sophisticated operation using legitimate car sales to launder money from other sources. Emma had been an unwitting participant, signing documents. That gave Derek's illegal activities a veneer of legitimacy. We need to contact the FBI, Ray said finally. Emma's testimony could be the key to bringing down Derek's entire operation. But what about the baby? Emma asked, instinctively protective. If I testify against Derek, won't that put us both in danger? Actually, it'll protect you, Carol explained. Federal witnesses get protection that local law enforcement can't provide. Derek won't be able to touch you. As the evening wore on, the group refined their strategy. Instead of just defending against Derek's attacks, they would go on the offensive, using Emma's knowledge of his criminal activities to expose him completely. Tom Jensen would coordinate with federal authorities to ensure the story broke in the media. Simultaneously with any arrests, Dr. Henley would document the medical impact of Derek's harassment on Emma's pregnancy. And the entire town would stand as witnesses to Derek's attempts to intimidate and silence his victim. There's one more thing, Sarah Beth said as the meeting broke up. Derek's going to escalate when he realizes we're fighting back effectively. He'll get more desperate, more dangerous. Everyone needs to be prepared for that. Marcus looked around at the faces of his neighbors and friends, people who had chosen to stand with Emma despite the personal cost. Then we'll be ready for him. As everyone left for the night, Emma found herself alone with Marcus in the quiet house. Outside, the media circus continued, but inside, she felt the same sense of safety that had drawn her to his porch that rainy morning. Marcus, she said softly, whatever happens with Derek, I want you to know that you saved my life. Not just from the cold and rain, but from giving up completely. Marcus settled into his recliner, looking tired but determined. We're not done yet, Emma. Derek's going to learn that Millbrook Falls doesn't abandon its own, even if I'm not really one of your own. Marcus smiled. You became one of our own the moment you needed help, and we had the chance to give it. That's how communities work, not by blood or birthplace, but by choice. Outside, Derek's hired investigators continued their surveillance, gathering information for their next assault on Emma's newfound sanctuary. But inside the house on Maple Street, a pregnant young woman finally had something she'd never had before, a family willing to fight for her, no matter the cost. The war for Emma's freedom was entering its most dangerous phase, but she was no longer fighting alone. And Derek Hoffman was about to discover that some things like love, loyalty, and the fierce protectiveness of a small town couldn't be bought, intimidated, or destroyed. Tuesday morning shattered the uneasy calm when Emma doubled over in pain during breakfast. Marcus had been making scrambled eggs while Mrs. Chun helped Emma sort through the baby clothes they'd bought, when suddenly Emma gasped and grabbed her belly. Something's wrong, she whispered, her face going white. This isn't normal. Dr. Henley arrived within minutes of Marcus's frantic phone call, but one look at Emma's condition told her everything she needed to know. We need to get her to the hospital immediately. She's showing signs of preeclampsia, and the baby could be in distress. The ambulance ride to Millbrook General Hospital became a gauntlet of flashing cameras and shouted questions from reporters who had been monitoring police scanners. Derek's media circus had turned Emma's medical emergency into a public spectacle, with news crews racing to film her being wheeled into the emergency room. Vultures, Mrs. Chun muttered, positioning herself between Emma's gurney and the nearest camera. Have they no decency at all? Dr. Henley took charge in the emergency room with the authority of someone who'd been delivering babies in crisis situations for 3 decades. Emma's blood pressure had spiked dangerously high, and the baby's heart rate was showing concerning irregularities. Within an hour, Dr. Henley made the decision that would change everything. "We need to deliver this baby tonight," she announced to Marcus and Mrs. Chun in the hospital corridor. "Emma's condition is deteriorating, and waiting any longer could be fatal for both of them." The news spread through Millbrook Falls faster than wildfire. Tom Jensen's newspaper office became an impromptu coordination center as townspeople called to ask how they could help. Carol Jensen worked her legal contacts to ensure hospital security would protect Emma from unwanted visitors, while Ray Morrison coordinated with local police to manage the media presence outside the hospital. But Derek had been monitoring the situation through his network of informants, and he arrived at the hospital just as Emma was being prepped for emergency surgery. He'd abandoned his previous strategy of working through intermediaries, instead appearing in person with what appeared to be legitimate legal documentation. "I'm the father of that child," Derek announced to hospital security, producing papers that claimed to establish his parental rights. "I demand to be present for the delivery." Hospital Administrator Linda Walsh, no relation to Emma, despite the shared surname, found herself in an impossible position. Derek's documentation appeared authentic, but Emma had specifically requested that he be barred from the hospital. The situation was complicated by the fact that Derek hadn't been officially served with any restraining orders, and his legal team had been careful to ensure their paperwork appeared legitimate. Marcus confronted Derek in the hospital lobby. Their voices carrying across the quiet space, despite both men's attempts to remain civil in public. "She doesn't want you here, Derek. Can't you respect that?" "What Emma wants isn't the issue," Derek replied, his calm demeanor not quite hiding the fury beneath. "I have legal rights as the father of this child, and I intend to exercise them. Your rights end where her safety begins." Derek's smile was cold and calculated. "Mr. Rodriguez, you've been very helpful in caring for Emma during her ... episode, but she's about to become a mother, and she needs proper support from the child's actual family." The confrontation was interrupted by Sarah Beth Williams, who had driven from her bed and breakfast the moment she heard about Emma's emergency. Her presence seemed to rattle Derek's composure for the first time since he'd arrived in Millbrook Falls. "Hello, Derek," she said quietly, positioning herself between Derek and the elevator that led to the maternity ward. Derek's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. "Sarah Beth, I heard you were in town spreading lies about me." "Not lies. Truth. The same truth Emma's been telling, and the same truth your other victims would tell if they weren't too scared to speak. I don't know what fantasy you've constructed, but room 1247 at the Marriott downtown. April 15th, 2023. Sarah Beth interrupted, her voice carrying clearly across the lobby. "That's where you held me for 6 hours, threatening to have me committed if I didn't sign papers admitting I was mentally unstable." Derek's face went pale as several people in the lobby turned to stare. Sarah Beth continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "The scar on my left wrist from when you grabbed me so hard you broke the skin. The restraining order I filed that mysteriously disappeared from court records after your lawyers got involved. The job references you sabotaged, the apartment applications you had rejected with false criminal background reports. You're obviously having another breakdown. The only thing breaking down is your ability to silence your victims," Sarah Beth said firmly. "Emma's testimony to the FBI was just the beginning. They're very interested in your business practices, Derek, very interested in how you've been using shell companies and fake identities to launder money through your dealerships." The mention of the FBI investigation hit Derek like a physical blow. His confident demeanor evaporated completely, replaced by something desperate and dangerous. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he hissed at Sarah Beth, stepping closer in what could only be interpreted as a threat. Ray Morrison appeared at that moment, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. Mr. Hoffman, I think it's time for you to leave. I have legal documentation, which we've had verified, Officer Janet Martinez interrupted. Those custody papers were filed in a county where you don't have standing, by a judge who's never heard of this case. That's federal fraud, Mr. Hoffman. Derek looked around the lobby, realizing for the first time that he was surrounded not just by law enforcement, but by members of the Millbrook Falls community who had come to support Emma. Mrs. Chun stood near the information desk, her arms crossed and her expression fierce. Tom Jensen was clearly recording the entire confrontation for his newspaper. Carol Jensen was on her phone, presumably with federal authorities. "This isn't over," Derek said, backing toward the exit. "Emma belongs to me, and so does my child." "No. One belongs to you," Marcus replied quietly. "And if you come near Emma or her baby again, you'll discover just how protective this community can be." As Derek left the hospital, his departure was captured by the same news cameras that had been hoping to film Emma's medical crisis. But the narrative had shifted completely. Instead of the sympathetic father figure Derek had tried to portray, the cameras captured a man who had just been publicly accused of fraud, domestic violence, and federal crimes. Upstairs in the delivery room, Emma was fighting the battle of her life. Dr. Henley had determined that a cesarean section was necessary to protect both mother and child, but Emma's blood pressure remained dangerously elevated. The stress of the past week, combined with months of poor nutrition and the trauma of Derek's harassment, had taken a severe toll on her body. Marcus waited in the surgical family area, joined by what seemed like half the town of Millbrook Falls. Mrs. Chun had organized a prayer circle that included people from every church and faith community in town. Tom Jensen was coordinating with hospital staff to ensure Emma's privacy was protected. Carol Jensen was on the phone with federal prosecutors, providing real-time updates about Derek's behavior at the hospital. At 11:47 p.m., Dr. Henley emerged from surgery with a tired but triumphant smile. "Emma's stable, and you have a beautiful, healthy baby girl. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and already showing her mother's fighting spirit." The cheer that went up from the waiting room was audible throughout the maternity ward. Mrs. Chun immediately began crying happy tears, while Marcus felt a profound relief that surprised him with its intensity. This child, who wasn't even related to him, had somehow become as important to him as his own daughter. "Can we see them?" Marcus asked. "Emma's in recovery, but she's awake and asking for you specifically," Dr. Henley said. "And I think she has something important to tell you." In the recovery room, Emma looked exhausted but radiant as she held her daughter for the first time. The baby was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a head of dark hair that matched her mother's. "Marcus," Emma said softly as he approached the bed, "I want you to meet Grace." "Grace?" "Grace Rodriguez," Emma clarified, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "If you'll let me give her your name. You saved both our lives, and I want her to know where she comes from. I want her to have a real family." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Emma, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Derek may be her biological father, but you're the one who protected us, who gave us a home, who showed us what real love looks like." Emma's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. "I'm going to petition the court to terminate Derek's parental rights and ask you to legally adopt Grace." The request hit Marcus with unexpected force. He'd thought he was simply helping a stranger in need, but somehow he'd become a father again. Looking down at baby Grace, who had wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb, Marcus realized that his life had just changed in the most wonderful way possible. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Emma replied. "Will you be her father, Marcus? Really and truly?" Marcus looked at this young woman who had stumbled into his life during her darkest hour, at the perfect baby girl who represented hope and new beginnings, and at the community of friends who had rallied around them all. "Yes," he said simply. "I'd be honored." Outside the hospital, Derek sat in his car watching the celebrations through the windows of the maternity ward. His careful plans had crumbled completely. His legal strategies had been exposed as fraudulent, and his victim had found something he couldn't touch or destroy, a family that chose to love her. For the first time in his life, Derek Hoffman had truly lost. But men like Derek didn't accept defeat gracefully, and his final desperate gambit would put everyone Emma cared about in mortal danger. 3 days after Grace's birth, Emma was finally strong enough to go home. The entire town of Millbrook Falls had transformed Marcus's house into a celebration of new life. Neighbors had decorated the porch with pink balloons and welcome home signs. Mrs. Chun had prepared enough food to feed an army, and Tom Jensen had organized a collection that resulted in enough baby supplies to stock a nursery store. Dr. Henley discharged Emma with strict instructions for rest and monitoring, but her prognosis was excellent. "You've been through more stress in the past 2 weeks than most people face in a lifetime," she told Emma. "But you're young, strong, and you have an incredible support system. Grace is lucky to have you as her mother." As Marcus carried the car seat containing baby Grace up the front steps of their home, he noticed something that made him pause. The house no longer felt like the hollow shell it had been for 8 years. It felt alive again, filled with purpose and love and the promise of a future worth living. Emma settled into the rocking chair that had mysteriously appeared in the living room, a gift from Mrs. Chun, who claimed it had been gathering dust in her attic. As she nursed Grace, surrounded by friends who had become family, Emma finally allowed herself to believe that her running days were over. But Derek Hoffman hadn't given up. His legal challenges had failed, his media manipulation had backfired, and his intimidation tactics had only strengthened the community's resolve to protect Emma and Grace. Faced with the complete collapse of his control, Derek made a decision that would have deadly consequences. Late Thursday night, as the house on Maple Street slept peacefully, Derek parked his car 3 blocks away and approached on foot. He'd spent 2 days studying the neighborhood's patterns, noting when lights went off, when people walked their dogs, when the streets were completely deserted. He knew that Marcus worked nights and wouldn't be home until dawn. He knew that only Emma and the baby would be in the house. Derek had convinced himself that if he could just talk to Emma alone, without the interference of her misguided protectors, he could make her understand. She belonged to him. The baby belonged to him. This fantasy life she was living in some small town would never last, and the sooner she accepted that reality, the better for everyone involved. What Derek didn't know was that the community's protection of Emma extended far beyond what was visible. Mrs. Chun had taken to sleeping in the guest room on nights when Marcus worked, unwilling to leave Emma and Grace alone. Ray Morrison had organized an informal neighborhood watch that kept eyes on the house around the clock. And Carol Jensen had petitioned the court for an emergency protection order that made any contact with Emma or Grace a felony. Derek picked the lock on the back door with skills he'd learned during a misspent youth, moving through the darkened kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd studied the house's layout through windows and online real estate photos. He'd planned this carefully: no violence, no dramatic confrontations, just a quiet conversation that would convince Emma to leave voluntarily. But as Derek crept up the stairs toward Emma's room, he stepped on the loose floorboard that Marcus had been meaning to fix for months. The creaking sound echoed through the quiet house like a gunshot. Emma woke instantly, her new mother's instincts alert to any sound that might threaten Grace, when she saw the dark figure in her doorway, silhouetted against the hallway light. Her blood turned to ice. "Hello, Emma," Derek said softly, stepping into the room. "We need to talk." Emma's hand moved instinctively to the baby monitor on her nightstand, not to call for help, but to turn up the volume so that Mrs. Chun would hear everything happening in the room. "Get out," Emma whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. You're violating a court order. Court orders are just pieces of paper, sweetheart. What matters is what's real, what's true. And the truth is that you belong with me." Derek moved closer to the bed, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had once made Emma believe he loved her. "This whole small-town fantasy has been charming, but it's time to come home. This is my home. Grace is my daughter. And you have no power over us anymore." Derek's expression hardened. "Grace is my daughter too, Emma. My blood, my genes, my legacy. Do you really think some middle-aged stranger can replace her real father?" In the next room, Mrs. Chun had heard every word through the baby monitor. She'd already called 911 and was now moving silently through the house, her phone in one hand and Marcus's old baseball bat in the other. At 72, Mrs. Chun had survived the Cultural Revolution in China and raised 4 children as a single mother in America. She wasn't about to let some entitled criminal threaten her surrogate family. "Marcus has been more of a father to Grace in 3 days than you ever could be in a lifetime," Emma said, finding strength in her voice. "He protected us when we needed protection, loved us when we needed love, and gave us a home when we had nowhere else to go. Protection from what? Love from whom?" Derek's voice grew louder, more aggressive. "I'm the one who took care of you, who gave you everything you needed. And this is how you repay me? By running away and playing house with some pathetic widower?" The sound of sirens in the distance made Derek realize his time was running out. His careful plan for a quiet conversation was disintegrating, just like everything else in his previously controlled world. "You're coming with me," Derek said, lunging toward the bed. "Both of you, right now." But Mrs. Chun chose that moment to step into the doorway behind Derek, the baseball bat raised and ready. "I don't think so," she said calmly. Derek spun around, startled by the elderly woman's sudden appearance. "This doesn't concern you, old woman. Get out of my way." "Everything that happens in this house concerns me," Mrs. Chun replied. "Emma is my family. Grace is my family. And family protects family." Derek made the mistake of reaching for Mrs. Chun, probably intending to push her aside. But Mrs. Chun had spent 60 years practicing Tai Chi, and her reflexes were still sharp. She sidestepped Derek's clumsy grab and brought the baseball bat down hard on his shoulder, sending him stumbling into the dresser. "You crazy old," Derek started to say, but the sound of police cars pulling into the driveway cut him off. Within minutes, the house was filled with law enforcement officers. Derek found himself surrounded, handcuffed, and facing charges that would keep him away from Emma and Grace permanently. Breaking and entering, violating a protection order, attempted kidnapping, and threatening behavior that violated the terms of his federal investigation. As Derek was led away in handcuffs, he made one final attempt to assert control over the situation. "This isn't over, Emma," he shouted as police officers forced him toward their car. "You can't hide from me forever. That baby is mine." Emma watched from her bedroom window as Derek was driven away, Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms. For the first time since she discovered she was pregnant, Emma felt truly free. Marcus arrived home to find his house full of police officers, neighbors, and the remnants of Derek's final desperate gambit. When Mrs. Chun explained what had happened, Marcus felt a rage unlike anything he'd experienced since Sarah's diagnosis. The thought of Derek in Emma's room, threatening her and Grace, made him want to drive to the jail and finish what Mrs. Chun had started. But then he saw Emma sitting in the rocking chair, calmly feeding Grace while Officer Martinez took her statement. She looked tired but unbroken, peaceful in a way she'd never been while Derek remained a threat. "How are you?" Marcus asked, kneeling beside the rocking chair. "I'm good," Emma said, and meant it. "We're safe now, really, truly safe. Thanks to Mrs. Chun." Emma smiled at the elderly woman who was holding court in the kitchen, recounting her confrontation with Derek for the assembled crowd. "She saved us." "But Marcus, we've been safe since the day I woke up on your couch." Derek just finally realized it. The next morning brought news that would ensure Derek Hoffman never threatened anyone again. The FBI arrested him on federal charges related to his money laundering operation, using evidence that included Emma's testimony and documents she'd unknowingly signed. The charges carried a minimum sentence of 15 years, and that was before state prosecutors added kidnapping and domestic violence charges. More importantly, Derek's arrest freed his other victims to speak publicly. Sarah Beth Williams gave a television interview detailing Derek's pattern of abuse, and within days, 3 other women came forward with similar stories. The man who had once seemed untouchable was facing decades in prison. 6 months later, Millbrook Falls celebrated Grace Rodriguez's official adoption with a community party that filled the entire town square. Marcus had legally become her father, Emma had legally become his daughter through adult adoption, and Grace would grow up surrounded by an extended family that included everyone from Mrs. Chun to Dr. Henley to the Morrison brothers. Tom Jensen's newspaper ran a front-page story about the adoption that was picked up by national media, but this time the coverage focused on the community that had rallied around a stranger in need. Millbrook Falls became a symbol of what was best about small-town America, the willingness to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Emma spoke at the adoption celebration, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd of people who had become her family. "When I collapsed on Marcus's porch that morning, I thought my life was over. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and no hope for the future. I was just trying to survive one more day." Emma paused, looking out at the faces of people who had transformed her world. "But this community didn't just help me survive. You helped me discover what it means to truly live." She turned to Marcus, who was holding Grace and trying not to cry. "Marcus, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me shelter when I was homeless, protection when I was threatened, love when I felt unlovable, and hope when I thought there was none left in the world." "You saved mine too," Marcus replied quietly. "This house had been empty for 8 years, even though I was living in it. You and Grace brought it back to life." Mrs. Chun, who had been watching this exchange with satisfaction, stepped forward with a gift for the new family, a photo album she'd been secretly compiling since Emma's arrival. The pictures told the story of their unlikely family's formation, from the first tentative photos of Emma helping with housework to the joyful images of Grace's homecoming. But the final photo in the album was one Mrs. Chun had taken just that morning, Marcus, Emma, and Grace on their front porch, with the entire community of Millbrook Falls gathered behind them. It was a picture of belonging, of love that transcended blood relations, of a family that had been forged in crisis and strengthened by community. As the celebration continued into the evening, Emma found herself standing in the same spot where she'd first collapsed 6 months earlier. The scared, pregnant teenager who had fallen unconscious on a stranger's porch was gone, replaced by a confident young mother with a family that would protect her forever. Grace gurgled happily in her arms, reaching for the string lights that Mrs. Chun had hung for the party. This baby would grow up knowing she was wanted, loved, and protected by an entire town. She would never know the fear and uncertainty that had defined her mother's childhood. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, joining Emma on the porch. "Steps. Just remembering," Emma said softly. "6 months ago, I thought I was going to die alone in the rain. Now look at us." Marcus looked out at their celebration neighbors sharing food and stories, children playing games on the lawn, friends who had become family gathering to honor love in all its forms. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said. "What?" "Grace is going to grow up thinking this is normal. That communities always come together to protect their own. That strangers always help people in need. That families can be made from choice as much as blood." Emma smiled, understanding what he meant. Grace would be raised with the expectation that the world was fundamentally good, that people could be trusted, that love was more powerful than fear. She would carry that faith with her throughout her life, spreading it to others just as Millbrook Falls had spread it to her mother. As the stars came out over Millbrook Falls, Emma made a silent promise to her daughter and to the community that had saved them both. She would spend the rest of her life paying forward the kindness she'd received, helping other lost souls find their way home. And in a world that often seemed dark and uncaring, the story of Emma and Grace Rodriguez would stand as proof that miracles still happened, one act of kindness at a time, one open door at a time, one community willing to love strangers as their own. The girl who had collapsed on Marcus Rodriguez's porch had found more than shelter from the storm. She had found her place in the world, and in finding it, she had reminded an entire town what it meant to be truly human. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply open your door to someone who needs help. Because you never know, in saving someone else, you might just save yourself. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.